Hey TV Maniacs, I'm KG and Apple TV Plus has quietly become one of the most reliable places for truly premium TV, sharp writing, gorgeous cinematography, big name talent and shows that actually feel curated instead of algorithmically spat out. So today I'm breaking down the absolute best series Apple TV Plus has ever released, the ones that nail character, atmosphere and pacing. Some of these are heartfelt, some are mind-bending and a few will emotionally wreck you, but all of them are worth your time. So grab your snacks, get comfortable and let's dive into the Apple TV Plus shows that prove streaming doesn't need quantity when you've got quality. Let's jump right in. A Premier League team in shambles, an owner looking for a fresh start and maybe a little revenge, and an American football coach who has never watched a game of soccer in his life. That's the setup for Ted Lasso, and somehow it becomes one of the most heartfelt, funny and unexpectedly emotional shows Apple TV Plus has ever released. Jason Sudeikis leads the cast as Ted, a relentlessly optimistic coach whose charm is so disarming that everyone around him assumes it's an act, but it isn't. Supporting him is an ensemble that becomes instantly iconic. Hannah Waddingham as the steel-spined owner with secrets, Brett Goldstein as Roy Kent, the human embodiment of Growl, Juno Temple as Keely Jones, who walks in as comic relief and walks out as the show's hidden soul, and Brendan Hunt as Coach Beard, a mystery wrapped in deadpan. What makes the show's heart beat is the creative team behind it. Developed by Bill Lawrence, Jason Sudeikis, Brendan Hunt and Joe Kelly, the series blends feel-good comedy with the kind of emotional honesty Lawrence is famous for. Beneath the jokes and the locker room chaos, the show tackles panic attacks, masculinity, mentorship, and the messy work of actually becoming better people. And it never feels preachy, it feels personal. Ted's arrival at AFC Richmond turns every character into their best and worst selves. The players aren't caricatures, they're insecure, brash, loyal, infuriating, and incredibly human. The longer you stay with them, the more you realize the show isn't really about winning games. It's about vulnerability, about growth, about what it means to choose kindness in a world that constantly rewards cynicism. Visually, the show has that unmistakable Apple TV Plus sheen, warm lighting, cozy pubs, green pitches that look too perfect to be real, and the tone, a mix of sincere optimism, sharp comedy, and emotional punch-ups that will absolutely wreck you when you least expect it. Watch it when you want a series that feels like a hug, a pep talk, and a therapy session disguised as a sports comedy. A show that leaves you believing people can change and maybe even believing in yourself a little more too. Imagine the last 10,000 people on Earth all living in a giant underground bunker, forbidden to question the past, forbidden to go outside, and forbidden to ask why. That's the world of Silo, a sci-fi mystery where every rule is absolute, every truth is manufactured, and breaking the wrong one can get you killed. At the center is Rebecca Ferguson as Juliet, an engineer who wants nothing to do with politics until she is dragged into a conspiracy that starts with a single death and ends with a question no one's allowed to ask: what's actually outside the silo? Ferguson plays her with a mix of grit, grief and suspicion that makes her instantly compelling. A reluctant detective unraveling a system built to keep people obedient and afraid. The cast around her is stacked. David Oyelowo as the Silo's sheriff caught in a moral trap, Rashida Jones and Ian Glenn in roles that frame the mystery, Tim Robbins as a quiet, calculating power player whose every smile feels like a warning, and Common as Sims, a high-ranking enforcer whose calm, controlled presence is somehow more intimidating than any weapon. It's one of those ensembles where you can feel an entire society under pressure through the smallest interactions. Created by Graham Yost from Justified and based on Hugh Howey's best-selling novels, the show is meticulously crafted. Yost brings his signature tension, conversations that feel like clues, deaths that feel like turning points, while Apple brings the scale, colossal sets, industrial architecture stretching into darkness, and an atmosphere so claustrophobic you start to feel the walls closing in too. The tone is bleak but addictive, part conspiracy thriller, part dystopian mystery, part slow burn character study. Every floor of the silo feels like a different world, every rule feels like a trap, and every answer unlocks a bigger, more terrifying question. Watch it when you want a sci-fi thriller that's smart, atmospheric, and impossible to stop once you start. A series that dangles hope just far enough out of reach to keep you desperate for the next revelation. A world still shaken by Godzilla's rampage, a secret organization hiding decades of classified encounters, and a family whose entire identity unravels the moment they discover their father was living a double life. Monarch: Legacy of Monsters takes the massive scale of the monsterverse and shrinks it down to something even more terrifying: the human fallout. The story begins when siblings Kate and Kentaro find evidence that their missing father was connected to Monarch, the shadowy agency tracking creatures that predate humanity. Their search pulls them into a conspiracy that stretches across continents and decades, revealing how long monsters have been walking the earth and how many people have risked everything to keep that truth hidden. The cast is stacked with emotional firepower and franchise gravitas. Anna Sawai anchors the series with a grounded, quietly fierce performance. Ren Watabe brings earnestness and conflict as Kentaro, and then you have Wyatt Russell and Kurt Russell playing the same character, Lee Shaw, across two timelines. Wyatt gives you the swaggering, rule-breaking soldier. Kurt brings the grizzled survivor who already knows exactly how deep Monarch's secrets run. Created by Chris Black and Matt Fraction, the show threads the monsterverse spectacle through an emotional spy thriller. Instead of non-stop kaiju battles, you get tension, discovery, betrayals, hidden labs, old files, soldiers who saw too much, scientists who weren't believed, and monsters that aren't villains so much as forces of nature we never learned to respect. And yes, the Titans are here. Godzilla appears with the weight of a natural disaster, other creatures rise out of jungles, oceans, and frozen wastelands like myths suddenly made real. But the show's brilliance is that every monster sighting feels earned, not noise but punctuation. The tone is atmospheric, globe-trotting, and surprisingly intimate. It feels like a mystery thriller that just happens to have skyscraper-sized creatures waiting in the wings. It's about survival, trauma, legacy, and what happens when ordinary people get caught between the truth and the thing that's about to step on it. Watch it when you want a monster series with actual emotional stakes, a show that blends spectacle and storytelling into something bigger, smarter, and far more human than you'd ever expect from a franchise built on giant creatures flattening cities. A toxic marriage, 5 fiercely loyal sisters, and a death that might not be an accident at all. Bad Sisters starts with a funeral of a man nobody in the room seems particularly sad about, and then rewinds to show you just how far a family will go to protect one of their own. The Garvey sisters are everything their brother-in-law isn't. Warm, chaotic, deeply bonded, and absolutely done with watching their sister Grace be suffocated by a husband who manipulates, humiliates, and isolates her at every turn. So they make a decision. If the system won't save Grace, they will. The question becomes not why the man died, but which sister tried hardest to make sure he did. The ensemble is pitch perfect. Sharon Horgan leads the pack as Eva, the blunt, brilliant oldest sister who's been carrying the family for decades. Anne-Marie Duff, Eva Berthiso, Sarah Green, and Eve Hewson each carve out distinct personalities that snap into place like a perfectly dysfunctional puzzle. And Claes Bang is unforgettable as Jean-Paul, a villain so believably awful that every scene with him feels like someone holding their breath. On the other side of the mess are 2 hapless life insurance investigators played by Brian Gleason and Daryl McCormack, whose desperation to keep their business afloat turns them into accidental detectives scrambling to untangle a plot they're wildly unprepared for. Developed and written by Sharon Horgan, the series blends dark comedy and tense thriller elements with the kind of emotional honesty she's famous for. It's wickedly funny, morally tangled, and constructed like a puzzle box. Every episode unlocks a new motivation, a new secret, a new reason to root for women doing things they absolutely should not be doing. The tone is deliciously sharp: Irish cliffs, cozy pubs, holiday homes hiding horrible plans, and a soundtrack that makes even domestic chaos feel cinematic. It's a murder mystery where you already know who deserves to die, you just don't know who actually pulled the trigger on fate. Watch it when you want something funny, fierce, and delightfully dark. A show about sisterhood, survival, and the satisfaction of watching terrible men get exactly what's coming to them. Imagine if you could split your life in half, literally. One version of you goes to work, the other lives your personal life. Neither one remembers the other. It sounds like freedom until you realize you've trapped a version of yourself in a job you can never leave. That's the haunting premise of Severance, a workplace thriller that slowly mutates into a psychological horror story about identity, control, and the price of not knowing yourself. Adam Scott leads the series as Mark S., an employee at Lumen Industries who undergoes the severance procedure to escape the grief of his real life. His innie, the version trapped inside the office, wakes up every day in a world of white hallways, polite smiles, and rules that make no sense. And as both halves of Mark begin to suspect something is very wrong, the story becomes a tug-of-war between two versions of the same man trying to help each other escape. The cast is unreal. Patricia Arquette as a supervisor whose calm politeness is somehow more terrifying than aggression, John Turturro and Christopher Walken as two severed workers whose connection breaks the company's spell, Britt Lauer as Helly, the newest employee whose refusal to comply becomes the spark for everything, and Zach Cherry as the loyal company man trying desperately not to break down. Every performance feels surgical, precise, unsettling, and unforgettable. Created by Dan Erickson and executive produced and directed in large part by Ben Stiller, the show is designed like a puzzle you don't realize you're solving until the pieces snap into place. It's corporate satire wrapped in sci-fi, wrapped in existential dread. Every fluorescent hallway, every outdated computer, every bizarre company ritual hints at a truth that characters aren't supposed to discover. The tone is hypnotic, unnervingly calm, minimalist, and drenched in dread. The production design makes the office feel like a dream you can't wake up from, while the outside world feels even stranger, because the more you learn about Lumen, the more you realize how far its influence reaches. Watch it when you want a series that crawls under your skin and stays there, a slow burn mystery that's as emotional as it's mind-bending, and one of the smartest, boldest things Apple TV Plus has ever made. A legendary wine critic dies and leaves behind the most extraordinary inheritance challenge imaginable, a blind tasting competition worth millions, and only two people in the world are invited to compete. One is his estranged daughter, the other is his mysterious protege. Drops of God takes a simple idea, taste and memory, and turns it into a globe-spanning emotional jewel that feels almost mythic. Fleur Geffrier stars as Camille, a woman who hasn't seen her father in years and can barely stand the thought of wine after a childhood shaped by his obsessive training. Her opponent, Tomohisa Yamashita, plays Issei, the calm, disciplined student who understands her father's world better than she ever did. The will states that whoever wins a series of near-impossible tasting tests inherits his entire wine empire. Whoever loses gets nothing. Created by Kwok-dang Tran, the series blends family drama, sensory mystery, and competitive tension into something you can't look away from. The inheritance plot isn't just a game, it's a test of identity, memory, trauma, and the way taste can connect you to the moments you've spent your whole life trying to forget. Every challenge feels like a psychological excavation, scents that unlock childhood wounds, flavors that feel like confessions, vintages that reveal how differently two people can love the same man. And as Camille and Issei dive deeper into the world of rare wines, the contest becomes a mirror, showing them what's been broken long before the first bottle is opened. The tone is elegant and sensory, vineyards at golden hour, Tokyo bars humming with quiet ritual, French estates full of secrets, and wine treated like a language only the damaged can speak fluently. It's as emotional as it is competitive and as intimate as any romance, even though it isn't one. Watch it when you want a series that feels like a beautifully crafted novel, emotional, atmospheric, quietly fierce, and proves that taste can be as powerful, painful, and revealing as any truth. MI5's Rejects, Britain's Worst Spies, a department where careers go to die. That's the setup for Slow Horses, a spy thriller that shouldn't work on paper and yet it becomes one of the smartest, sharpest, most addictive shows on Apple TV+. Slough House is where the agency dumps its screw-ups, operatives who've blown missions, embarrassed superiors, or made one mistake too big to forgive but too small to fire them for. Their punishment is mind-numbing paperwork, endless busy work, and the daily torment of their boss, the legendary and legendarily miserable Jackson Lamb, played by Gary Oldman in one of the greatest performances of his career. Oldman plays Lamb like a genius buried under layers of filth, sarcasm, and cigarette smoke, a man who looks like he slept in a dumpster but thinks 10 steps ahead of everyone else in the building. Opposite him is Jack Lowden as River Cartwright, a young MI5 agent desperate to prove he's more than the screw-up his file says he is. Together they lead an ensemble of misfits, Kristen Scott Thomas as the icy calculating MI5 director, Saskia Reeves, Rosalind Ellis, Jonathan Pryce, Christopher Chung, each one bringing something brittle, funny, or wounded to this world. Based on Mick Herron's best-selling Slough House novels, the show blends espionage, satire, and character study with surgical precision. Every mission feels like a political trap disguised as an opportunity. Every victory feels like a mistake someone else will take credit for. And every episode reminds you that the biggest threat to national security might be MI5's own office politics. The tone is pitch perfect, dry British humor, razor-sharp dialogue, morally muddy decisions, and thriller plots that start small and blow up fast. It's gritty without being grim, funny without even undercutting the suspense, and paced like a fuse slowly burning toward a very messy explosion. Watch it when you want a spy series that's smarter than the genre usually allows, a show where the heroes are damaged, cynical, and occasionally incompetent, but still the only ones capable of saving the day. A family separated by borders, a love that reshapes generations, and a story that crosses Korea, Japan, and America to show how history leaves marks that never quite fade. Pachinko is an epic told with the intimacy of a whisper, a multi-generational saga about survival, identity, and the quiet strength it takes to keep going when the world keeps pushing you down. At the heart is Sunya. As a young woman, her life in Japanese-occupied Korea shatters after a relationship with a wealthy stranger, and the choices she makes in that moment ripple through her children and grandchildren for decades. Her story intertwines with that of Solomon, her American-educated grandson, whose own identity crisis mirrors the struggles his family thought they'd left behind. Developed by Soo Hugh and based on Min Jin Lee's acclaimed novel, the series is meticulously crafted, narratives weaving back and forth across decades, languages, and continents with effortless clarity. It doesn't rush, it breathes, it lets you feel the weight of history not as exposition but as the air these characters are forced to live in. Visually, Pachinko is stunning. Misty coastlines, dim boarding houses, bustling Osaka streets, sleek corporate towers, each timeline with its own color palette and emotional temperature. The show's structure, cutting between generations, creates a rhythm that feels hypnotic, like memory itself guiding you through one family's story of endurance and hope. Watch it when you want a series that sweeps you up completely. Emotional, cinematic, deeply human, a reminder that the biggest epics are made from ordinary lives surviving extraordinary times. A grieving therapist decides he's done being polite and starts telling his patients exactly what he thinks. No filters, no boundaries, no professional distance. Just raw honesty from a man who's barely holding it together himself. Shrinking takes a premise that should be a disaster and somehow turns it into one of the most warm-hearted, emotional, and quietly brilliant comedies on Apple TV+. Jason Segel stars as Jimmy, a therapist drowning in grief after his loss. Jason Segel stars as Jimmy, a therapist drowning in grief after the loss of his wife. His life has collapsed, his relationship with his daughter is falling apart, and he's running on fumes when he snaps and tries a new approach to therapy. Radical, blunt, sometimes chaotic honesty, and strangely it starts working, sort of. The cast around him is phenomenal. Harrison Ford gives one of the best performances of his later career as Paul, a legendary therapist whose grumpy exterior hides a deeply compassionate and deeply stubborn heart. Jessica Williams shines as Gabby, the colleague who refuses to let Jimmy spiral alone. Created by Brett Goldstein, Jason Segel, and Bill Lawrence, the series blends laugh-out-loud comedy with real emotional weight. It doesn't shy away from grief, depression, loneliness, or anger, but it treats them with tenderness instead of tragedy. It understands that healing is ugly and non-linear, and that sometimes the only thing keeping you going is the people who refuse to give up on you. The tone is warm, funny, and sneakily profound. Sunny Pasadena streets, backyard barbecues, therapy offices full of breakthroughs and breakdowns. The show feels grounded and lived in, with humor that never undercuts the pain underneath. It's emotionally rich without being heavy and funny without being cynical. Watch it when you want a comedy that hits you right in the heart. A show about grief, forgiveness, community, and the messy hopeful work of trying to put yourself back together. A high school reunion ends with one of the guests lying dead at the bottom of a cliff, and every person at the after-party becomes a suspect. The after-party takes the classic whodunit and turns it into something wildly inventive. Each episode retells the same night in a completely different genre, depending on the character's point of view. One person's story plays like a musical, another like a noir thriller, another like an action movie, and the result is a mystery that's as smart as it is chaotic. The cast is stacked. Haddish leads as Detective Danner, a quirky but razor-sharp investigator who thrives on reading people. Sam Richardson is a Nick, the lovable escape room designer who always seems 2 steps behind fate. Zoe Chow plays Zoe, the grounded, warm-hearted foil caught between past and present, and the ensemble around them, Ben Schwartz, Ike Barinholtz, Ilana Glazer, Dave Franco, Ken Jeong, John Cho, Paul Walter Hauser, and many more, turns the mansion-set murder mystery into a playground. Created by Christopher Miller, the series is built like a cinematic experiment. The same clues, the same timeline, the same crime, but a completely different feeling every time the story resets. You don't just learn more, you see how personality shapes memory, how ego distorts truth, and how wildly unreliable every witness really is. Tonally, the show is a blast. Bright, stylish, meta, and endlessly rewatchable. One episode is a rom-com, the next is a psychological horror, the next is a 2D cartoon, and yet the core mystery stays tight and satisfying. It's playful without ever losing the stakes, and the genre shifts make the reveals feel fresh instead of forced. Watch it when you want a mystery that's clever, funny, stylistically bold, and absolutely unlike anything else. A genre-hopping puzzle box that turns every suspect into the star of their own movie. In the 1950s, a brilliant chemist is told that doesn't belong in the lab, so she does something unthinkable. She turns a cooking show into a masterclass in science, independence, and tearing apart the expectations holding women back. Lessons in Chemistry starts as a period drama and quietly becomes a story about revolution. One woman changing the world from inside a television studio. Brie Larson stars as Elizabeth Zott, a chemist whose mind is decades ahead of her time and whose field has no interest in letting her succeed. After being pushed out of the career she's devoted her life to, Elizabeth ends up hosting a daytime cooking program, and instead of smiling through recipes, she teaches chemistry, autonomy, and the radical idea that women deserve more than the roles they're assigned. Larson plays her with a perfect blend of sharp wit, vulnerability, and that simmering frustration of someone who knows she's being underestimated at every turn. She's surrounded by a beautifully cast ensemble. Louis Pullman as Calvin Evans, the reclusive genius who finally sees her for who she is, Aja Naomi King as her steadfast friend and neighbor, and Stephanie Koenig, Kevin Sussman, Beau Bridges, and Alice Hosey, adding richness and texture to Elizabeth's world. Each character reflects a different version of the era, the hopeful, the trapped, the progressive, the terrified of change, and all of them help shape Elizabeth's journey. Adapted by Lee Eisenberg from Bonnie Garma's best-selling novel, the series sticks close to the book's heart, a woman who refuses to shrink to fit the life she's given. It balances humor and heartbreak with surgical precision, moving from lab tables to living rooms to TV stages without losing the emotional thread that holds the whole story together. Visually, it's gorgeous, warm colors, retro sets, crisp lab glassware glowing under 1950s lights. The tone shifts effortlessly between romance, drama, and quiet rebellion. It's tender, empowering, and occasionally devastating, reminding you that progress often starts with a single voice refusing to stay silent. Watch it when you want a series that feels meaningful without being preachy, an inspiring, beautifully shot story about ambition, love, and the courage to redefine your life on your own terms. A woman survives a brutal attack, and when she wakes up, her reality keeps shifting. Her desk moves, her apartment changes, her memories don't match the world around her. Shining Girls starts as a crime thriller and slowly becomes something far stranger, a story about trauma that literally rearranges itself, and a killer who seems to move through time like it's just another doorway. Elizabeth Moss is electrifying as Kirby, an archivist at a Chicago newspaper who's trying to rebuild her life after being assaulted by a man no one ever found. But when a new murder surfaces that matches her case exactly, down to the details no one else could know, Kirby realizes the only way to reclaim her life is to hunt the man who tried to take it. Moss plays her with raw, jittery intensity, a woman who's terrified and furious, fragile and unstoppable all at once. Opposite her is Wagner Moura as Dan, a worn-down reporter who becomes both ally and anchor in a story that keeps warping around them. And then there's Jamie Bell, delivering one of the creepiest, most understated performances in recent memory as Harper, a killer who stalks his victims across shifting timelines, always watching, always waiting, always just out of reach. Based on Lauren Buca's novel and developed by Silke Luisa, the show blends psychological thriller with sci-fi mystery in a way that feels seamless. It doesn't explain everything, it suggests, letting the strangeness seep in slowly until you realize the rules have changed and Kirby is the only one adapting fast enough to keep up. The tone is eerie, fragmented, dreamlike. Chicago feels cold and lonely, full of shadows and echoes, time loops in smooth, disorienting ways, a different shirt, a different pet, a different version of a life Kirby thought she understood. The show visualizes trauma not as memories, but as reality bending around a survivor who refuses to be erased. Watch it when you want a thriller that's unsettling, emotional, and legitimately original. A mystery that doesn't just keep you guessing, it keeps shifting the ground under your feet. A hospital loses power in the middle of Hurricane Katrina. The floodwaters rise, the heat becomes unbearable, supplies run out, and inside those darkened hallways, doctors and nurses are forced to make decisions no medical training could ever prepare them for. The series follows what happened at Memorial Medical Center when the storm hit New Orleans in 2005 and how 5 days of chaos led to accusations of euthanasia, criminal investigations, and a national debate about who gets to decide who lives when help isn't coming. It's the kind of true story that keeps spiraling long after the storm passes, because the hardest questions come when the water is gone. Vera Farmiga delivers one of her most powerful performances as Dr. Anna Poe, a surgeon caught between medical duty and impossible reality. Cherry Jones is riveting as the hospital's incident commander, trying to maintain order as the infrastructure collapses around her, and the rest of the characters feel painfully human, exhausted, desperate, terrified, and doing everything they can with the scraps they're given. The series is adapted from Sherry Frink's Pulitzer Prize-winning reporting. The story is approached with precision and restraint, no sensationalism, no melodrama, just the brutal reality of a building cut off from the world while hundreds of lives hang in the balance. The tone is suffocating in the best way. Flooded streets, pitch black rooms, the hum of failing generators, the eerie silence of a city abandoned. You can feel the heat, the fear, the weight of decisions that can't be undone. It's a disaster thriller that slowly morphs into an ethical drama, then into a courtroom reckoning, and every shift hits like a punch. Watch it when you want a series that's intense, thought-provoking, and deeply human. A story that forces you to confront what you would do when every option is the wrong one and survival isn't guaranteed. A squadron of young American pilots flying impossible missions over Nazi-occupied Europe, engines freezing, oxygen failing, flak exploding around them, and survival rates so low that making it home alive felt like winning the lottery. Masters of the Air is Apple TV Plus's next great World War II epic, a brutal, breathtaking companion to Band of Brothers and the Pacific, and a story about the men who fought their war miles above the ground. The series follows the real-life 100-bomb group, nicknamed the Bloody 100, because of their devastating losses. These weren't fighter pilots, they were the crews flying massive B-17 flying fortresses deep into enemy territory, often outnumbered, outgunned, and painfully aware that every mission could be their last. Each episode plunges you into the chaos of air combat, claustrophobic cabins, frozen instruments, black clouds of anti-aircraft fire, and a terrifying quiet after an engine goes dead. The cast is exceptional. Austin Butler stars as Major Gale Buck Cleven, charismatic, stoic, and born to lead. Callum Turner plays Major John Egan, his best friend and the emotional counterweight to Buck's steady focus. Together, they anchor the story with a mix of confidence, fear, swagger, and heartbreak. Produced by Steven Spielberg, Tom Hanks, and Gary Gutman, the same team behind Band of Brothers, the series carries the same DNA: meticulous research, emotional honesty, and a refusal to romanticize war. Directors Kari Fukunaga and Dee Rees bring stunning cinematic weight to the story, balancing massive aerial battles with the personal cost of fighting a war that turns boys into ghosts long before the fighting ends. The tone is epic and deeply human. Massive dogfights filmed with IMAX-level ambition, smoky English airfields where men laugh too loudly just to keep fear from settling in, prison camps where survival turns into a different kind of battle. It's both grand and intimate, a portrait of courage, trauma, friendship, and the thin line between heroism and survival. Watch it when you want a World War II series that feels huge, emotional, and historically immersive, a story about ordinary young men thrown into extraordinary danger and the brotherhood that kept them alive through the worst days of the war. A brilliant Chicago prosecutor becomes the prime suspect in the murder of his colleague, a colleague he also happened to be having an affair with. Presumed Innocent takes a classic legal thriller setup and turns it into a tense character study about obsession, power, and how quickly the system turns on the people who think they understand it best. Jake Gyllenhaal stars as Rusty Savage, a prosecutor whose life implodes overnight when the woman he was secretly involved with is found brutally murdered. Rusty insists he is innocent, but the evidence isn't on his side. His colleagues want him gone, and the media is circling like sharks. Gyllenhaal plays him with the signature intensity. Part control, part unraveling, a man desperate to save his career, his marriage, and the version of himself he wants everyone to believe. The rest of the characters add layers to the mystery. Barbara, Rusty's wife, navigating betrayal and public humiliation with a mix of hurt and strength, the legal heavyweights pushing the case forward, the victim at the center of everything, and a rival attorney played by Peter Sarsgaard who sees Rusty's downfall as long overdue justice. Their dynamics turn the courtroom into a battleground of old grudges, quiet resentments, and shifting alliances. Created by David Kelly and executive produced by J.J. Abrams, the series updates Scott Turo's classic novel for a modern audience. It's sleek, tightly written, and full of the kind of procedural detail Kelly thrives on, but with a darker psychological edge that puts you inside Rusty's spiraling mind. The tone is stylish and suffocating at the same time. Polished offices, cold courtrooms, tense interrogations, and a constant feeling that everyone in Rusty's orbit is hiding something, including Rusty's Dusty himself. Every episode leaves you uncertain whether you're watching an innocent man fight for his life or a guilty one fighting to keep the truth buried. Watch it when you want a prestige courtroom thriller with real emotional stakes, a series full of twists, messy relationships, moral ambiguity, and elite performance that keeps you second-guessing everything you think you know. A wealthy hedge fund manager loses his job, his marriage, and his status, so he does the only thing left he knows. He starts robbing the mansions of his own neighbors. Your Friends and Neighbors opens with a body at a party, then rewinds to reveal how everything fell apart. Money gone, ego bruised, secrets buried behind the suburbs' white picket facade. Jon Hamm stars as Andrew Cooper, divorce on his record, unemployment in his filing cabinet, and desperation in his eyes. Amanda Peet plays his ex-wife Mel, and Olivia Munn is Sam Levitt, neighbor and affair partner turned co-conspirator whose ambitions and fears collide with Coop's collapse. Created and showrun by Jonathan Trooper, the series blends sharp social satire with crime drama tension. He frames Coop's descent not as an outlier story but as a symptom, when privilege, pressure, and desperation collide in a bubble built on borrowed wealth. Every theft in the series is as much about taking back power as it is about hiding the fact you've already lost it. The plot runs like a thriller beneath the surface of a suburban soap opera. Mansion after mansion, Coop steals valuables, but the real evidence isn't in the watch he pawns, it's in the unspoken lies he accumulates. He isn't just risking arrest, he's risking exposure, meaning control slipping into chaos. Every key dropped, every secret recorded, every alliance tested becomes part of a calculus no amount of money can solve. The tone is stylish, viciously wry, and deeply uncomfortable. The cinematography glides through luxury homes that feel as trapped as the characters inside them. Watch it when you want a series that's equal parts crime capade and character study, smart, biting, unafraid to show the cracks in wealth, reputation, and the friends who watched it all fall apart. A private investigator with a code, a missing girl no one else is willing to look for, and a city full of secrets that get darker the deeper you dig. Sugar starts like a classic LA noir and then bends into something stranger, a mystery where nothing is quite what it seems, including the detective himself. Colin Farrell stars as John Sugar, a soft-spoken old-school PI who moves through Los Angeles like he stepped out of a different era. He's polite to a fault, unusually empathetic, and frighteningly good at finding people who don't want to be found. When the granddaughter of a famous Hollywood producer vanishes, Sugar takes the case, and quickly discovers that this isn't just another missing person story. It's a thread that once pulled exposes the rot beneath the industry's glossy surface. The series blends neo-noir mystery with something more existential, a story that starts grounded but slowly reveals an off-kilter edge that makes you question every character's reality. Farrell's performance anchors everything, gentle, observant, quietly haunted. Sugar isn't a swaggering noir hero, he's a man who feels too much, who notices what everyone else ignores, and who carries a loneliness that sits behind every polite smile. The tone is dreamy, moody, and slightly disorienting, sun-drenched LA streets hiding cold, clinical truths, neon-lit bars where everyone tells half the truth, crime scenes framed like paintings, and a sense of melancholy that builds toward the show's bigger reveal without giving itself away. Watch it when you want a detective story that starts familiar but grows into something bold, stylish, and deeply character-driven. A noir mystery with real emotion and a protagonist you can't stop watching. A galactic empire at its peak, a scientist who predicts its fall, and a plan to save humanity that requires letting everyone collapse first. Foundation takes Isaac Asimov's legendary sci-fi saga and turns it into one of the most ambitious, visually breathtaking series on streaming. A story about destiny, rebellion, mathematics, fate, and the terrifying idea that the future might already be written. At the center is Harry Seldon, played with magnetic calm by Jared Harris, a mathematician who invents psychohistory, a way to predict the behavior of entire civilizations. His calculations reveal the Empire is doomed and the only hope is to create a foundation that will preserve knowledge through the Dark Ages to come. The Empire is not thrilled. Li Pei's dominates as Brother Day, one of the genetically cloned emperors who rule the galaxy in an endless cycle of inherited perfection. He's regal, ruthless, conflicted, and terrifying in stillness. Opposing him is Lu Lobel as Gao Dorning, the prodigy whose life is ripped apart the moment she aligns herself with Seldon's impossible mission. And Leah Harvey as Salvor Hardin becomes the show's beating heart, a protector, a believer, a fighter whose instincts are often the only thing keeping the Foundation alive. Developed by David Goyer, the series approaches Asimov's universe with both reinterpretations, expanding characters, deepening emotional stakes, and adding human connections to balance the galaxy's spanning scale. Goyer leans into the thematic core, the tension between free will and destiny, between order and collapse, between the systems we build and the people trapped inside them. Visually, the show is jaw-dropping. Vast orbital stations, oceanside citadels, planets swallowed by sand, temples carved into cliffs. Every world feels like its own culture with history etched into the architecture. The cosmic scale is enormous, but the camera is equally obsessed with faces. Fear, faith, doubt, longing, reminding you this isn't just about empires rising and falling, it's about the humans caught in the gears. The tone is operatic, intellectual, and immersive. Philosophical debates wrapped in political tension, explosions of rebellion surrounded by quiet moments of prophecy, gorgeous costume design, choir-like scores, and a slow-burn plot that rewards patience with massive emotional payoffs. Watch it when you want sci-fi that's big, bold, and unapologetically smart. A series that combines spectacle with soul and asks the biggest question a story can ask. What shapes the future? Who gets to decide it? And can fate ever truly be rewritten? A charismatic drug dealer is given a choice: serve 10 years in a minimum security prison or walk free if he can extract a confession from a suspected serial killer inside a maximum security facility for the criminally insane. Blackbird takes that already nightmarish premise and turns it into a suffocating psychological thriller where every conversation could be the one that gets you killed. Taron Egerton stars as Jimmy Keen, a smooth-talking, well-connected guy whose charm has always gotten him out of trouble, until it doesn't. When the FBI approaches him with their impossible offer, Jimmy is suddenly forced into a world where his swagger means nothing and one wrong sentence could be his last. Opposite him is Paul Walter Hauser as Larry Ho, delivering one of the most chilling performances in modern true crime. Larry is quiet, awkward, unsettlingly meek, and possibly responsible for dozens of murders. Every conversation between Jimmy and Larry is a mind game. Every pause, every stutter, and every oddly polite phrase feels like a trap. Hauser's performance is so precise it's genuinely hard to tell where delusion ends and manipulation begins. Created by Dennis Lehane, the novelist behind Mystic River and Gone Baby Gone, the series feels like a pressure cooker slowly tightening around its characters. The tone is dark, humid, and tense, concrete walls, echoing hallways, and heavy silence of a place full of men who have nothing left to lose. Conversations feel like interrogations, smiles feel like warnings, and the danger is never loud, it's in the way someone looks at you a second too long. Watch it when you want a psychological thriller with real teeth, a true crime series that's disturbing, gripping, brilliantly acted, and impossible to stop once you're inside the cage with them. The Soviets land on the moon first, and suddenly the entire trajectory of human history veers into a new timeline. For All Mankind starts with one small twist in 1969 and unfolds into a sprawling alternate history epic where the space race never ended. Every decade brings new missions, new politics, new astronauts, new heartbreaks, and humanity pushes farther and faster into the stars because losing simply isn't an option. The series follows NASA through generations of triumphs and disasters. moon bases, global tensions, private space competition, Mars colonies, and the everyday people caught in the gravity of history. It's equal parts sci-fi, political drama, character study, and emotional gut punch, all built on the idea that ambition can change the world, but it always comes with a cost. Joel Kinnaman anchors the early seasons as Ed Baldwin, a Navy pilot turned astronaut whose career takes him higher than he ever dreamed, and whose personal life fractures under the weight of those dreams. Michael Dorman plays Gordo Stevens, who gives one of the most heartbreaking performances in the entire series. The show has the confidence and depth of something plotted years in advance. There are Battlestar Galactica nods everywhere, layered politics, moral dilemmas, escalating stakes, and emotional through lines that hit harder because the sci-fi concepts never overshadow the humans at the center. The tone is expansive and immersive, the production design is immaculate, and because the timeline keeps evolving, the show never stagnates. Each season becomes its own era, its own cultural moment, its own set of impossible choices. Watch it when you want a series that blends the wonder of space exploration with the messiness of human ambition. A bold, emotional, meticulously crafted saga about how far we are willing to go to reach the future. A crisis-ridden Hollywood studio, a newly promoted boss who still believes in movies, and a corporate world that demands hits, IPs, and zero risk. The studio opens the doors to the chaotic inner life of modern film production, where dreams go to die quickly, budgets explode loudly, and the drinks keep coming. Seth Rogen leads as Matt Remick, the cinephile turned studio head who thinks the best movie in the world is still just one green-lit film away. Catherine O'Hara is Patty Lee, Matt's mentor turned ghost of a studio past. Ike Barinholtz is Sal Saperstein, Matt's close friend and vice president tracking every misstep. Chase Sui Wonders plays Quinn Hackett, Matt's former assistant who suddenly thinks she belongs at the table, and Catherine Hahn shows up as Maya Mason, head of marketing, whose job is making your failure look like a win. Created and directed by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, the series is part satire, part love letter to Hollywood's golden age, its current meltdown, and the people who stay because they can't imagine doing anything else. The world is messy and glamorous in equal measure. Late nights in executive offices, trailers for a fake Kool-Aid Man blockbuster, cameos by real-life directors playing versions of themselves, and studio lots that feel like battlefields. Every keycard swiped, every greenlit script, every celebrity cameo hides someone's dream or someone's breakdown. Watch it when you want a show that's equal parts raunchy comedy and insider expose, sharp, hilarious, and surprisingly tender about the industry that makes stories for all of us. A grieving Philadelphia couple hires a young nanny to join their home, and from the moment she steps inside, nothing feels quite right. Servant begins as a quiet domestic drama and slowly mutates into something far stranger. A psychological horror story told through whispered conversations, tense dinners, locked doors, and a creeping sense that this house has secrets no one is willing to name aloud. Lauren Ambrose and Toby Kebbell star as Dorothy and Sean Turner, two parents trying to hold their fractured lives together after an unimaginable loss. Their relationship is tender, brittle, and full of unspoken rules, the kind that form when people are doing everything they can not to break. When Nell Tiger Free arrives as Leanne, the new live-in nanny, her polite smile and quiet devotion feel comforting, until they don't. Leanne is beautiful, she is gentle, she is deeply religious, and she becomes unsettlingly attached to her new role in ways neither Dorothy nor Sean understands. Then the strange occurrences begin, shifts in mood, unexplained noises, rituals no one asked for, and behaviors that blur the line between dutiful care and something disturbingly possessive. The show never tells you what's happening directly, it suggests, and that's what makes it fascinating. Created by Tony Baskalop and executive produced by M. Night Shyamalan, the series thrives on atmosphere, tight hallways, dim lighting, lingering shots, and the sense that the house itself is watching. The Turner's brownstone becomes a pressure cooker, full of secrets, fragile emotions, and a young woman whose presence seems to bend reality around her. Watch it when you want a horror series that's intimate, eerie, and impossible to categorize. A stylish psychological thriller that keeps you guessing right up until the moment it decides you've earned an answer. And there you have it, 22 of the very best Apple TV Plus series out there, prestige dramas, mind-bending sci-fi, sharp comedies, thrillers that get under your skin, and shows that genuinely feel crafted. Let me know in the comments which Apple TV Plus show hooked you the hardest and which ones I missed. If you're new here, I'm KG, this is Watch This Instead. I help you cut through the endless scrolling and find the shows actually worth your time. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, share it with a fellow TV addict, and subscribe for more smart weekly recommendations. Thanks for watching, happy binging, see you in the next one, and remember, sleep is optional when there's one more episode.